Weekly Spooky is brought to you by our generous supporters on Patreon. Get access to exclusive podcasts, videos, and more for as little as $1 a month when you go to WeeklySpooky.com and click on the Patreon link. Your support has gotten us to 100 episodes, so join up today and help us create another 100 and beyond. Head over to WeeklySpooky.com and join the Patreon.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my friends. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Henrik Kuto, and we have a chilling story for you tonight, and I hope you enjoy it a whole lot. It's a perfect story to cure you from your cabin fever, and I know a whole lot about cabin fever right about now. If you haven't noticed, I have a little extra bass in my voice. I've been a bit under the weather. In fact, tomorrow is the end of my quarantine, so yes, I've got the Rona. But I'm doing okay. I'm doing better than okay because I'm talking to you all, and I'm about to give you a very scary story. So, before we get to the story, please take just a little moment out of your day and go to your favorite podcasting app and make sure you subscribe and leave us a positive review or just a couple stars. I mean, ideally 4 or 5, but whatever you think is appropriate. Those star ratings on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, and anywhere else really help people discover the show and give us a listen. It's a great way to help us out. And if I have to, I'll play the "Oh, I'm so sick, please, please." So, if you don't mind, please do. And if you love what we're doing, maybe today's the day to head to WeeklySpooky.com and click on Patreon. And for as little as $1 a month, you can help us bring the spooky every week. I really do appreciate it. But for now, my friends, it's time to head down to the valley because the weather appears to be turning. You never really know what those mystical systems have up their sleeves. So let's listen right now. It Never Snows in the Valley by Charles Campbell. Crystal Parker was awake early, but that wasn't unusual. She rolled over in bed, reaching for the remote, accidentally knocking it off the bedside table. The plastic banged onto the hardwood floor, and Crystal heard batteries rolling, probably under the bed. "Shit," Crystal mumbled, hoping the remote didn't crack into pieces upon impact. Her bare feet hit the hardwood, and a chill ran up her legs. "Fuck, it's freezing," she said to a lonely room. The wind was picking up outside, and she was so happy. It was Saturday. It meant she didn't have to leave the confines of her country home, set back in the valley woods, and that was A-OK with her. Now, with the wind, she hoped that her satellite television hadn't gone out. It was a shitty service, but it was what she could afford. Crystal stepped quickly to the kitchen, where she opened the proverbial junk drawer. She assumed just about every family in America had one. She smiled as luck seemed to be on her side, and removed 2 AAA batteries that were nestled in the back corner. Crystal quickly placed them in the remote. She pulled the transparent tape from the same drawer and severed a piece to serve as a makeshift battery cover. She clicked the remote and was met with the dreaded "Service interrupted" message that came with every hard wind and overcast sky. Crystal was glad she picked up the high-def antenna so she could at least get the local 3 channels. She flipped the switch on the side of the remote from satellite to television and entered the numbers 1 and 2. Waited a second before the television registered the command and was met with the severe weather alert crawl at the bottom of Channel 12's broadcast of Die Hard. "What the fuck?" she mumbled. Just yesterday, the same channel's weather team declared a bright and sunny weekend. As a matter of fact, Rhonda Craven said, "unseasonably warm." "What a crock of shit," Crystal yelled, startling herself in the starkness of the empty home. She sighed and moved quickly to find her slippers before adjusting the thermostat to a balmy 74 degrees. Crystal yawned and contemplated a shower, but reminded herself it was Saturday, cold, and she didn't have to be anywhere. So she plopped down on the couch. Bruce Willis was crawling through a vent, muttering something about, "Come to L.A., we'll have a few laughs." Crystal glanced at her phone, and it was approaching noon. She had really slept in. Crystal rarely ever slept past 7. She reckoned her body was telling her that she needed the rest. Her job as a sales and marketing director for Augusta magazine was stressful for sure, with tightening budgets and tanking subscribers. It was the damn internet. They had a small internet presence, but the publisher was set in his old ways of print media being the master, and everything else was just window dressing. The old coot was well on his way to running the magazine into the ground. Crystal stared at the television for a few minutes, not really watching, deep in thought, when what she saw out the living room window snapped her back to reality. "Can't be," she mumbled as she raised from the couch and approached the window. But there it was, stark white against an overcast sky. It was falling, relentlessly. Snow? Really? It never snows in the valley, Crystal said. She should be excited because this was a rare occasion indeed, and on top of that, it was a surprise. Nary a single news outlet called for this, not even icy rain. It was supposed to be clear and sunny today, but it was the polar opposite. "I don't like it," Crystal said aloud. It unsettled her. It didn't feel natural. It didn't feel jolly. It felt sinister, and Crystal didn't know why. She stared out the window as the snow fell even harder. Crystal placed her hands on the sill and moved her face close to the pane. Then, the snow moved in a way she had never seen snow fall before. Not that she'd experienced a lot of snowfall in her life growing up in the valley, but the sheets of snow began slapping the window. Slapping, then hammering. Hard. "The fuck?" Crystal mumbled. The snow was sticking to the window pane in clumps, and it was alive. Each flake was crawling across the pane sort of like a snail, but they were fusing together into something. Oh shit. Crystal stumbled backward, turned quickly, and dashed toward the bedroom to grab her cell phone. She halfway expected there to be no signal based on her crappy satellite service, but there was a full slate of bars. She dialed 911, not really certain of what she was going to say, and Crystal's heart sunk when she got the dreaded, "All circuits are busy. Please try your call again." "What year are we in?" Crystal asked with a puzzled look at her cheapo Walmart Android phone. Okay, Ronnie, I'll call Ronnie," Crystal said as she hung up and tapped on Ronnie's name. "All circuits are busy. Please try your call again." "Oh my God, you can't be serious right now," Crystal shouted. Suddenly, the lights began flickering, and Crystal heard the distinctive sound of scratching all around her. She turned her attention back to the living room window. It was completely covered, and she could see small shards of what looked like razor teeth grating against the glass. It was row after row of teeth with what kind of looked like snow behind them, but seemed to have a gelatin-like quality, quivering as the teeth did their work. They were going to break the glass. "Oh, fuck," Crystal whispered and darted to her bedroom. The power zapped off and, even though it was technically daylight outside, every window was covered in these things so that the house was almost pitch dark, save for the light from her cell phone, which thankfully had over a 90% charge. Crystal held it in front of her as she hastily pulled open the top dresser drawer and removed 2 t-shirts, pulled them over her head, and grabbed a hoodie out of the closet. She followed that up by slipping on the thickest pair of sweatpants she owned. Crystal found her tennis shoes hiding under the foot of the bed and put them on after she grabbed a pair of socks from the dirty clothes hamper. That's when she heard the first wave of glass shatter. "Oh shit," she said as she scanned the room for her car keys. She almost succumbed to panic until she saw them sitting on the bedside table right beside where the remote had been. Crystal grabbed them and darted back to the living room. It was frigid and the snow had accumulated. It was moving slowly in thick globs, scraping the hardwood with what she correctly deduced were tiny razor teeth under the slimy-looking exterior. Crystal moved swiftly toward the front door with keys in hand and, by sheer luck, leaning against the coat rack beside the front door was an oversized Augusta magazine golf umbrella. Crystal almost darted out the door with nothing covering her noggin, and that probably wouldn't have ended well for her. She grabbed the umbrella and opened it inside the house. She figured her luck couldn't get much worse and held it in front of her like a sword going into battle. Crystal stepped under the umbrella as soon as she cleared the door and felt the weight of the living snow hit the thick fabric, teeth already going to work. "Fuck me!" Crystal screamed as she slogged toward her car. She was careful enough to think about her head, but now she realized her feet were at risk and high-stepped as quickly as she could to the driver's side of her Nissan Rogue. There were sickening splats under her feet as she ran. She had the car door open when she felt the sharp pain just above her right ankle. Crystal tossed the now shredded umbrella onto the ground as she jumped into the car and slammed the door. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" Crystal screamed as she frantically removed her right shoe and peeled away the sock. There was blood. The snow globs full of teeth were still gnashing at her, looking for flesh. Crystal grabbed the shoe and smashed the globs. It almost sounded like bubble wrap popping as they burst and sprayed a clear liquid with each pop. It didn't take long for the scent to hit Crystal's nose. It smelled of sulfur. "What the actual fuck?" she screamed. This had to be a nightmare. This was not real. She'd wake up in her bed and would think about what she'd eaten the night before to cause this kind of fucking night terror. No way in hell could any of this be real. Crystal closed her eyes, took a few deep breaths, and opened them again. What she saw was a windshield covered in these things scraping the glass, trying like hell to get inside. Crystal cranked up the car and hit the wipers. The snow globs in the wipers' path slid off to the left and right. The ones out of the wipers' reach kept on gnawing. Crystal put the car in reverse and began backing down her steep driveway. This was one of those times she wished she'd had neighbors. A house in the woods never worked well in horror movies, and it sure as shit wasn't serving her well in the here and now. Crystal tried the high beams, but quickly discovered they hurt her vision more than helping, so she reverted back to low beams. The Rogue wasn't sliding yet. Crystal felt that she had firm control of the car and was able to get down the driveway. The scratching on her windshield worried her, but the glass was quite a bit thicker than her window panes, so it would take a little more effort from whatever the fuck these things were to pierce it. She'd get down the dirt road and onto Highway 421. Then she'd see if others were out and if anyone was doing something about this shit. Crystal wanted to glance at her phone, but rightfully kept her attention on the dirt road. It was covered in this demon snow. The Rogue was at the end of the road, and Crystal was making a right turn onto 421 when the first tire popped. She kept the car steady as she made the turn. Crystal could hear the rubber flapping on the street, but pushed the Rogue. All she had to do was get to Ball's filling station because directly across the street from Ball's was Harrison Caver Park. Crystal knew the park would have people in it. They would be congregated in the baseball hut, the place mothers held birthday parties for their little leaguers. All she had to do was get the Rogue to the top of the hill. That's when she heard the second tire pop. The car was sliding now, and Crystal didn't see another car on the street. The snow globs fell furiously from the sky. The windshield wipers were still doing their job, knocking away as many that got in their way, but the ones out of their reach kept scraping away. A crack started in the top left corner of the windshield, and Crystal didn't want to imagine what would happen if a wave of those fuckers got through. It was going to be difficult enough to get out of the car and get to the baseball hut without getting eaten alive. The Rogue began smoking and sliding, threatening to glide on over into a ditch. Crystal pressed harder on the gas. She could see Ball's sign at the top of the hill. She was half a football field away. Crystal took a deep breath. That's when the third tire popped. The Rogue spun in the middle of the street. The steering wheel no longer offered any sort of control. Crystal removed her foot from the gas, resisting the urge to slam both feet on the brakes. Her daddy taught her a long time ago that she should let her car do what it was going to do and pray for the best. And that's exactly what she did. Crystal closed her eyes and held her hands close to her chest. There was a crunch of metal and shattering glass on the passenger side when she opened her eyes. The things flooded the seat, crawling greedily toward her for the taste of flesh. She had no umbrella, nothing to protect herself from the falling death. She opened the driver's side door and stepped out into the ditch. The things popped under her feet. A gloved hand grabbed her by the arm, and she didn't feel any of these things gnawing into her skull. Crystal looked up. It was Hambone, a name he carried with him all his life in the valley. Hell, it may have even been on his birth certificate. Hambone worked at Ball's, and he had a thick, blue tarp shielding the two of them. "Come on, ma'am," Hambone said in his husky voice. Crystal didn't say a word. She followed the man up the incline. She could feel the things attaching themselves to her sweatpants, but there was nothing she could do about it. Hambone was wearing thick rawhide work boots, which offered quite a bit more protection than her tennis shoes. They started biting her. Crystal screamed. Hambone looked down at the woman and realized what was happening. He let the tarp go flat and picked her up, knocking the globs away as best he could. They looked like a big blue ghost marching up to the store. Hambone reached through the tarp and pulled the door open. He carefully set Crystal down and turned the lock on the door. She was trying not to cry. She was failing. Hambone stomped on the things still stuck on the tarp. There were a few holes, but the heavy gauge of the material held up pretty well under the circumstances. "Mrs. Parker?" Hambone said as he reached toward her. "I'm okay, Hambone. They bit me through my pants a little bit. Can you get me some alcohol and bandages, please?" Crystal asked, stifling the tears that threatened to overtake her. "Yes, ma'am, I can. I got something for you to change into and some boots in the back. Mrs. Corley is about your size. It's her stuff," Hambone said as he quickly moved to get what Crystal needed. He returned and handed over the alcohol, bandages, clothes, and boots. "I'm going to stand over by the front door with my back to you. I won't look. Fix yourself up and change your clothes. I'll turn around when you say I can." Hambone finished and moved toward the door without waiting for a reply. Crystal removed her wet clothes. There were dime-sized bite marks from her ankles all the way up her thighs on both legs. They were circular and reminded Crystal of the skeletal jaws of a shark. She doused them with alcohol and winced at the sting before sticking the big square bandages on her legs. She put on the heavy flannel, thick coveralls, and boots that belonged to Mrs. Corley. They fit her almost perfectly. "Hambone, you can turn around," Crystal said. He slowly turned his gaze to her. How do you have power? Crystal asked. Mrs. Corley put a generator in years ago. It kicked on as soon as the power lit out, Hambone said matter-of-factly. Anybody at the park? Yeah, I seen some lights in the baseball hut, but they were under cover. I seen your car sliding, then heard the crash. I had to come help you, Hambone said, and turned back to the door. You saved my life, Crystal said. From where I'm standing, I don't know if I saved it or just gave you a few extra hours. I ain't never seen no snow like this. It's killing things. I heard the dogs howling in the back, but I couldn't do nothing for 'em. You know, Mrs. Corley, she lets them roam. After a little bit, they stopped howling. You thirsty, Ms. Parker? You gave me a few extra hours, Hambone, so call me Crystal, she said with a smile. Yeah, I could use a Coca-Cola, Crystal said as she removed one from the drink cooler. Hambone looked at her. His eyes lit up a bit, and a grin was about to fill his face when the screams came and snatched it away. Hambone turned toward the door and Crystal rushed to his side. The screams were coming from the park. Then a flood of folks came running outside, swatting at their heads and faces. Men, women, and children were trying to make it to their cars. Some were running toward the filling station. They were running until they weren't. Many fell to their knees, banging their fists against their heads and faces. The snow globs were chewing and tearing flesh. As soon as they were popped, they were replaced by more. The screams of the kids made Crystal's heart sink. She grabbed the tarp, turned the lock, and pushed on the door. Hambone's burly hand kept it shut. No, ma'am. Ain't nothing we can do to help them. We'll just die right along with 'em. Hambone, those are children, Crystal screamed. I understand that, I do. But we can't help them, and if you want to go ahead and speed up our time left on this earth, then we can go. But look at that tarp. It's already well on its way to being eat up, Hambone said. He kept his grip on the door, but would loosen it if Crystal insisted. There was silence. No more screaming. Crystal was crying and Hambone turned the lock before he released his grip on the door. The snow kept falling, and the valley went quiet. Hambone and Crystal moved to the supply room and shut the door. The generator was still humming. Crystal sniffled for a little while, not letting herself succumb to all-out sobbing. Hambone wondered when those things would break through the glass. The two of them sat in silence for hours before, miraculously, sleep came to them. Hambone and Crystal were leaned against the wall fast asleep. Crystal's head was resting on Hambone's shoulder, and his head was resting on a bread rack. Hambone woke up first. He could hear Mrs. Corley's rooster, Charlie, crowing his head off. Crystal wiped at the drool on her chin and thought for just a second that she was in her bedroom. That quickly changed when she rubbed her eyes and focused on Hambone. It was all true, not a dream. Shit. What time is it? Crystal asked when the rooster crowed again. Is that a chicken? Close enough, Hambone replied. Let's go, he said, and held out his hand. Crystal grabbed it and pulled up off the floor. Hambone pushed on the door. He couldn't hear the generator any longer. It must have ran out of gas. Hambone stepped inside the store first. Nothing was broken or out of place. Crystal followed closely behind. They walked together to the front door. The sun was shining brightly, and the two of them covered their eyes to get a look outside. The snow globs were gone. The door had been gnawed on, but it held. Crystal and Hambone could see them. The bodies lying all over the place in the Harrison Caver Park parking lot. Some had made it to the street, and a couple actually made it to the edge of Balls's parking lot. But they were all clean, white skeletons, picked to the bone. No flesh, no hair, no clothes, nothing but bone. And the sun was hot. Steam rose from the asphalt. Crystal and Hambone didn't know what to make of it. It was the damnedest thing they had ever seen in their lives. They didn't know how many lives were lost or if they were the only two people left in this world. Crystal looked at Hambone and said, "Don't ever believe Channel 12 and their weather. They didn't tell us any of this was coming." Hambone nodded his head and replied, "Yeah, I don't get it. Not one bit. It never snows in the valley." Did that one thrill you and chill you? Because it sure did me. Thank you so much to Charles Campbell for giving us such a beautiful story about unusual weather patterns and so much more. I really do appreciate it. And if you get a chance, check out his podcast. He has his very own show where he interviews the best of the horror genre. Authors, filmmakers, and more. In fact, you'll find an interview with me if you check him out at Horror 421. So punch that into your favorite podcast app, Horror 421, and give it a listen if you don't mind. So anyway, my friends, I really have to get out of here quickly because I need a rest. You can hear by my voice, I'm not quite 100% yet, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve your spooky on the weekly. And if you want to help me keep bringing this show for the indefinite future, please go to WeeklySpooky.com and click on Patreon. Become a backer for as little as $1 a month. You'll get exclusive content, advanced previews of all kinds of things, movies, horror stories, and more. And my undying gratitude. And speaking of Patreon, I want to say a very special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit extra every month to have their names read on the show by my silky and very bassy voice now. Those are Christopher Sullivan, Gino Lyons, Karen Ouimet, Jack Kerr, Jeff and George Hilton, Craig Cohen, and Kevin Fry. Thank you guys so very, very much. And thank you everybody who's written me and wished me well, wished me a get well soon. I do appreciate it, my friends. But for now, I'm going to go rest, and I hope you all avoid the snow. So for myself, for my executive producer Rob Fields, for my producer Dan Wilder, and my composer Ray Mattis, I will talk at you later.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.